By his own word, Rick is the smartest man in the universe, or to put it more correctly, Ricks are supposed to be the smartest men in the multiverse. Is the unified intelligence of millions of Ricks what kept the Citadel of Ricks together when the Council of Ricks was murdered, instead of the Citadel collapsing like the Galactic Federation? No, it wasn't. Even if there was some kind of solidarity between all of the Ricks in the Citadel, if the Ricklantis mix-up taught us anything, it's that hyperintelligence doesn't always mean you pull out ahead. Usually, there are other forces at play, especially if you're in a situation that makes you feel stuck. Hey everyone, I'm Justin with channel Frederator, and today on Cartoon Conspiracy, we're going deep down into the psyche of the Citadel of Ricks to figure out what glued it together in the absence of leadership, but how it's still falling apart. So here's what we know. The Citadel of Ricks is a large city-state originally created to hide Rick from their many enemies speckled around the multiverse. Since its inception, the population of the Citadel has burst from the thousands to the millions, but that population consists solely of Ricks and Mortys from different dimensions. The Citadel of Ricks was originally an oligarchy government by an elite few not elected by the citizenry. However, the council was under the thumb of the Shadow Council of Ricks, made up of 9 highly successful businessman Ricks. Business Ricks. Then Rick C-137, our Rick, teleported to the Citadel into a federal prison and murdered the Council of Ricks. Next time we see the Citadel, it's in the process of rebuilding and has become a democracy on the precipice of its first presidential election. In a gigantic upset, the Morty Party's candidate wins the race. However, for the Citadel, new Morty president just so happens to be our much-awaited Evil Morty, last seen puppeting an evil Rick in Close Encounters of the Rick kind. Evil Morty kills all but 2 of the Shadow Council and establishes what looks like an awful lot like a totalitarian dictatorship. Now, there's 2 questions this summation leaves behind. 1, why did the Citadel dissolve when the Council of Ricks was murdered? And 2, where do we go from here? Turn all the lights down now. Why the Citadel didn't make like the Galactic Federation and collapse is an unsurprisingly complicated question. It's tempting to go for more fantastical dystopian answers. For example, what if the impossible flavor of your own completion or the taste of shattering the grand illusion that makes up simple Ricks is some kind of massive population sedative, like Soma in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World? And in case you forgot your high school literature classes, Soma was a drug made by the government that allowed the user to forget pain and unpleasant emotions and enhance feelings of well-being. The government used it to suppress its citizens, and what if Simple Ricks was a similar drug, not as powerful, but still able to keep the population of the Citadel complacent enough not to stage a rebellion? It's a really fun theory, but honestly, it has its holes. For one, you can see a Shadow Council member eating Simple Ricks, and why would someone in the ruling class eat something designed to subdue citizens? Also, what about Mortys? The ad's target audience is clearly Ricks, yet Mortys are half the Citadel's population. While it's 100% valid to think of Simple Ricks as an escapist drug, it seems nowhere near powerful enough for a Soma-level government conspiracy. My guess is that eating Simple Ricks is more like having a fun night of drinking, but waking up the next morning feeling just a bit sadder than you were before. But, you know, on the scale of you could get a buzz from a wafer cookie. But the most important takeaway is this: if Simple Ricks really worked that thoroughly, why would almost everyone in the Citadel seem so goddamn sad? One of the opening shots of the Ricklantis experiment juxtaposes a wealthy Rick drinking some bubbly in a sweet ship against a blue-collar Rick on a train who sees the wealthy Rick and sighs deeply. This sets up the conundrum of the Citadel perfectly. As Evil Morty emphasizes in his debate speech, these Ricks have the same IQ. The class divide in the Citadel isn't as simple as Ricks on top, Mortys on bottom. There's internal class hierarchies among people with the exact same DNA. It's ridiculous. How is it that some have menial, unskilled jobs like the Simple Ricks factory workers, while other Ricks get to be the boss? The answer is deeply, darkly sewn into the fabric of the Ricklantis experiment: simple luck. In any big city with a large pool of potential workers, especially one whose population suddenly skyrocketed like the Citadel's, certain people are just going to be at the right place in the right time, regardless if they're better or worse or exactly the same at a particular job. Cool Rick gets to be the floor manager of Simple Ricks, even though he's new to the Citadel. The line worker who's been there 15 years stays in the same place, and why? I'd guess random insidery circles of favor and want an opportunity. There's no reason why one Rick should be a boss and then have another just be a factory worker. The two could be switched with little to no difference in the factory's ability to function because they are literally just both Rick Sanchez. But at the risk of sounding like I'm leading a philosophy class, the circumstances they've chanced upon have grown them apart and made them truly different individuals, one entitled and easygoing, the other bitter, depressed, and frustrated. When you hear that the Citadel of Ricks is comprised entirely of Ricks and Mortys, you'd expect minimally different variations on two personalities. But diving into the city's daily life, you see that's clearly not the case. Evil Morty's very existence is a clear example of how these supposedly set personality types can wildly mutate. Why do the Ricks who got thrown on the bottom rung feel any obligation at all to the Citadel? Couldn't they just leave at any time? Back to their Beth and Summers? Don't they all have portal guns? There was one line in the Ricklantis experiment that really stuck out to me. When Cop Morty and Cop Rick bust into Mortytown Loco's hideout, Cop Morty comments on how their Rick was using bootleg portal fluid. So does the government or some ruling body in the absence of one control who owns a portal gun? Remember too that the fed up simple Rick's factory worker had to include a portal gun in his demands. Plus the squad sent to handle the situation had to formally request one, which sure could easily be due to the bureaucracy, but it's still curious. Add this to a seemingly unaffiliated line in Morty's Mind Blowers when Morty with squirrels, Rick says they have to move to another reality. He frustratedly exclaims, "I said we could only do that a couple of times." Suppose even just a fraction of the multiverse's Ricks and Mortys had to jump dimensions a couple times, just like ours have had to. Even if you have infinite possible realities, if enough Ricks and Mortys were destroying even a few dimensions, each for all versions of themselves, wouldn't you get dangerously close to running up against that infinite curve? Why else could Rick and Morty only jump dimensions a couple of times? What if this paradox means that the Ricks and Mortys in the Citadel have nowhere else to go? The Citadel was made to protect Ricks from their enemies across the multiverse, and what if that means the circle in which Ricks can actually walk around are slowly shrinking? They're not welcome in their own realities, and they're running out of realities to jump to. Plus, even if these Ricks did have somewhere to go, what if they can't get there because most can't have a portal gun? I know what you're thinking. Didn't Rick invent the portal gun? Couldn't any old Rick just build one and get out of there? But let's circle back to our discussion of class. Let's talk about depression. What happens when the society you live in squashes your morale so much that the simple thought of getting out doesn't even occur to you or seems pointless or too much effort? Imagine you work on the line at Simple Ricks. You move to the Citadel because your own dimension got warped past fixing, Cronenberged. You could only find a boring entry-level job, the work slowly wore on you, you hate your job, you feel lonely, you feel hopeless because you're worried you've dead-ended. You've become depressed, and just trying to figure out how to leave seems like too much of a hassle. But you think about building a portal gun, but you can't get back to your original dimension, and you're sick of squeezing yourself into new ones. Not to mention that most versions of you have managed to anger lots of people, so you stay because you don't know what else to do. Now imagine you're just a Morty living in Mortytown. You've been told your whole life that you're dumb and expendable, and that you're just a sidekick to enable someone innately better than you to go about his business. You end up in the Citadel through decisions that probably weren't even your own, and you can't get out without making yourself subservient to another Rick. It's like Cop Morty. He wanted to be a normal kid, but was infuriated whenever anyone suggested he was second to Rick. He grew embittered and got caught in the stream that sweeps up most of the Ricks and Mortys that live in the Citadel. He felt like he had something to prove. When you're in the current, it's hard to swim out. Do you see what I mean? Usually when a civilization transfers from one type of government to another, all hell breaks loose, and picking up any history book will back me up on this. You expect protests, you expect angry mobs in the streets or people in power killing each other to stay in power. But inside the Citadel of Ricks, there were no protests that we could see, and the only mobs were ones cloning themselves into babies so the Morty candidate could kiss it. Doesn't that seem a little too civil? But obviously on the ground, the Citadel is not civil at all. Society has devolved into two strata, the rich and the poor, who are alienated from one another. Crime rates seem out of control, Ricks and Mortys alike kill each other with ease, there's increased tension between citizenry and the police and military, people can become so frustrated with the system that they kill their own boss. The Citadel is awash with the kind of general unrest among citizens that, in a democratic setting, setting would lead to an irregular choice of political representation. But at this point, it kind of feels like I'm not even talking about the Citadel of Ricks anymore. It sounds cliche to bring up, but when a large disenfranchised portion of your population gets restless, dictatorships have an opening to parade into the picture. A populist candidate comes along promising sympathy, promising equality, but uses the frustration of the masses to rise to the top and steal total control over the government. Enter Evil Morty. Rick C-137 thinks the Citadel is taken care of, but if the low-level Ricks and Mortys living at the Citadel didn't take to the streets and protest because of depression, resignation, and lack of alternatives, the problem isn't solved, it's simmering. A totalitarian regime isn't likely to solve that problem either. Instead, the Ricks who are on top now feel like they're suffering as well. What if we started with the wrong question? The question isn't why did the Citadel dissolve, but when will it? The ascension of Evil Morty makes the Citadel seem like Rome before the fall. The tensions beneath like lighting a very, very long fuse on a stick of dynamite and just waiting for it to reach the stick. So in short, the theory is this: that Ricks and Mortys in the Citadel didn't rebel because they were stagnated by their own depression, that this depression is in part because the dimension jumping of numerous Ricks has caused a narrowing window of opportunity that makes many feel like they're running out of options, that the Citadel regulates who owns a portal gun, and finally, that the political unrest from class tensions isn't settled, it's yet to bubble over. In trying to make light of what may be the most depressing cartoon conspiracy I've ever done, I'd give this theory 4 locker headshots of Jessica out of 5. But we want to know, what do you think? Tell us in the comment section down below, and make sure to subscribe to channel Frederator so you can check out the rest of our Rick and Morty related content that I promise is way less sad and I probably move my hands way less in. Plus, new episodes of Cartoon Conspiracy drop every Thursday, and as always, never forget, Frederator loves you.